Well, today is the first day of fall camp. That means football is here finally. So before the Tigers hit the field, I want to get into the offensive position battles that I'm going to be looking at throughout camp, plus my official Locked On LSU fall camp rules for the 2023 season.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen every single day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Plus, remember, we're also on YouTube as well. So you can listen to the podcast on your preferred podcast platform. Plus, you can always watch the podcast on YouTube as well. Wherever you listen, however you listen, and however you interact with the podcast, whether you like, comment, rate, subscribe, all of that great stuff. Just appreciate you for being here. And always appreciate you for making Locked On LSU your first listen every single day. Fall camp starts on Thursday. Fall camp starts today. It is here finally. I feel like training camp is just a little, think about you are starving, you're emaciated, and training camp is like the little snack that you get that just finally fills and fulfills some sort of craving or need that you've had over the past couple of months. That's exactly how I feel. We've all been wanting football. We've been missing football. It's been talking season in football, and now finally we get actual football. Now it's just training camp. I don't believe the pads are coming on quite yet, but it is something. When you're out there on the practice field, when you smell the grass, when you hear the sound of the whistle, it's just all is right with the world. So training camp starts today. It's going to be a long, tough couple of weeks for this LSU football team. I saw the schedule practicing early in the morning, then transitioning into film work, studying more classroom type of work, positional group meetings, and then rounding out the day with just kind of chilling. But that's what their lives are going to look like over the next couple of weeks on the practice field, in the weight room, in the film room. Just, rinse and repeat, copy and paste every single day. Now, on today's edition of Locked On LSU, I want to get into the offensive position battles that I'm going to be looking at throughout the rest of camp. I did defensive position battles on the last episode, so you can find that on your preferred podcast platform and on our YouTube page as well. So I want to get into offensive position battles, but before we get into all of that, first I want to get into my official rules of camp. Now, I've been to a college fall camp, an NFL training camp, if not both, every single year that I've been doing this job. It's been 7 or 8 years now. And I've picked up on some things. I've learned some things. Your first time out at camp, it's just exciting. It's just fun. You're just happy to be there. And I think that you have a tendency to overreact or maybe to overanalyze. So today, I want to establish our official Locked On LSU training camp golden rule. It's something that I'm going to hold myself to, and it's something that I want to challenge you all to hold yourselves to. When you hear these reports, when you listen to the podcasts, this is the golden rule. We're not getting too high, and we're not getting too low after one single day. I always had a tendency to do that. And I think we as fans have a tendency to overreact either one way or another. One player has a great day in camp, all of a sudden, he's going to be the savior of the offense or defense. Quarterback has a bad day in camp, all of a sudden it's, oh my goodness, we're going 5-7. This is horrible. Everything's terrible. We stink. Oh no, it's absolute riots in the streets. But that's not the case. When it's one single day of camp, when maybe it's one bad drill. I know we're all starved for football, you and me both. I'm ready for the season to get started. So whenever we're so starved and whenever we're just picking up on all the little breadcrumbs that we can get, we have a tendency to read too far into things. But that's the golden rule. We're not getting too high and we're not getting too low. because I know it. I can see the writing on the wall. There's going to be at least one day in camp where Jayden Daniels has a tough day, has a rough day. Maybe, overthrows receivers, maybe has a tough time getting rid of the football on time, maybe throws some interceptions, turns the ball over, whatever it might be. And there's a very, high likelihood that in that day that Jayden Daniels struggles, maybe Garrett Nussmeier has a great day. Maybe Garrett Nussmeier is hitting every receiver in stride. Maybe Garrett Nussmeier just looks like the man that day. And I can already see the writing on the wall. Garrett Nussmeier should be the starting quarterback. Jayden Daniels stinks. Garrett Nussmeier is the best. So on and so forth. But that's one day of practice. That's one day of camp. Could be one turnover that we saw a video of on Twitter versus one just absolute beauty dime of a pass. But we're not getting too high and we're not getting too low and we are not overreacting to one single day of camp. But that doesn't mean that we can't react to it. That doesn't mean that we can't talk about it or, dissect kind of what that means. Because just because it's one day of camp doesn't mean that it didn't happen. It doesn't mean that we can't say, hey, Jayden had a kind of tough day in camp today because the timing wasn't right. The touch just wasn't quite there. We can talk about that and what that means and what he needs to work on and what we want to see from Jayden Daniels the next day. We can talk about, what he's going to talk about with Brian Kelly that day, the film that he's going to watch. We can talk about that. We can talk about Garrett Nussmeier maybe potentially having a great day and what does that mean for this team? How can Garrett Nussmeier be used and utilized in this offense when he does look so good? And these are all just complete hypothetical situations. These didn't happen. I'm just using those two as an example just because it's the quarterback position and it's going to be something that we're going to be closely watching in camp. It doesn't mean that we can't talk about it and dissect exactly what that means. But what I'm saying is we're not going to make any large blanket statements about the team as a whole, the player as a whole, a position group as a whole, the offense or defense as a whole, just based off of one day. What I've learned throughout my my long career, I'm being facetious. What I've learned throughout my experience at training camp is you take every day at face value for what it is and you take it with a grain of salt. But I think the most important thing is, and the key thing is, noticing trends and making observations day by day by day. I think the most important thing is, hey, if Jayden Daniels has one bad day of practice and he comes back the next day and the timing is better, the touch is better. Well, then you can take away from that. He worked on that. He watched the film, he took to coaching, and he didn't make the same mistake twice. I think that's a positive thing. What I think you can take away is, let's say if the defensive line just absolutely dominates the offensive line in one single day of practice, that means you can feel really excited about the defensive line and maybe a little bit concerned about the offensive line, especially if it happens 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 days in a row. When you're stacking practices and making observations and seeing certain things, that's what I think the real true value of observations from training camp starts to come into play. When you're picking up on trends, when you're making observations, when you're seeing changes over time, when you're seeing improvements over time, that's where the money is. So that's my biggest message. It's my golden rule. We're not overreacting to one day of camp, but maybe this time next week we're going to feel like we have more tangible evidence and actual tangible things to talk about because we can make observations and we can piece things together. Maybe this time 2 weeks from now, then we'll have even more tangible evidence. Then we can piece even more things together because we have more of a sample size to evaluate from training camp. So as long as we're all on the same page, don't get too high, don't get too low. That's my official training camp golden rule. So I'm glad we could establish that. But coming up next, like I promised, my offensive position battles that I'm going to be watching over the next few days of camp. We will get into that coming up next. First, I want to tell you about LinkedIn Jobs. So, these days, every single new potential hire can feel like a high stakes wager for your small business. And you don't want to get into a high stakes wager when it comes to the business that you know and love. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. So it was kind of the station that I work for. One of our team members kind of left very suddenly, just taking care of something that they needed to take care of. So we were left in one of the most critical times of the year, right before football season. We were left trying to find someone to fill that role, but we're all busy. And, money doesn't necessarily grow on trees around here. So we went to LinkedIn Jobs, and it was great because it was so incredibly quick and it was for free. So all you have to do is go to LinkedIn Jobs. It's super, super easy to do. Go to LinkedIn Jobs, post your job, and post your job for free. And then you add that purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile, so everybody can get the word that you are hiring. Plus, LinkedIn Jobs has simple tools like screening questions that make it super easy for you to focus on the candidates with just the right skills and experience, so you can quickly prioritize who you would like to interview and hire. One thing about interviewing and hiring people is that a lot of times you get people that you land an interview with, but they just don't have the right experience. They don't have the right expertise. Well, LinkedIn Jobs takes care of that hard work for you. It's why small businesses ranked LinkedIn Jobs number one in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/locked on college. That is linkedin.com/locked on college to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Well, thanks again for making Locked on LSU your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Every dayer is coming up tomorrow on the podcast. We'll have a full breakdown of what we've seen at practice so far at fall camp. And just a full disclosure to everyone, I always like to remind everyone I don't live in Baton Rouge. I live in Nashville. I do sports talk radio here in Nashville. I'm not able to be out at fall camp every single day. So I rely on our colleagues and the boots on the ground, those who cover the team that are able to be at fall camp. I rely on their reports. So shout out to all of those people at the Advocate and the Valley Shook, whoever it might be, all of the local news stations, WAFB, WBRZ, WVLA. I rely on them. But what I'm not going to do is just regurgitate the information that's reported. That doesn't do you any favors. That doesn't do me any favors. So I'm going to read as many reports as I possibly can, and kind of do my own analysis of it. So I'm not just going to regurgitate the information that's already posted on those news sites or on the local media in Baton Rouge that covers LSU football. What I am going to do is read that and then give you my thoughts on it. Read that, give you my takes on it. So it's going to be completely unique practice analysis on Locked on LSU. So just wanted to kind of put that out there that my boots are not on the ground, but I sure wish they were. Really, really wish that I could be out there. But before we get into the breakdown of fall camp today, I want to establish the positional group battles offensively that I'm going to be looking at as fall camp progresses throughout the rest of summer. First one, the running back position. This is a freaking stacked running back room. I mean, this might be the most crowded running back room in the country. And I don't say crowded in a derogatory way. I just say crowded because one, there's a whole lot of bodies. Two, there's a whole lot of bodies that can contribute and start for your team right away. And it's also kind of a fun little switch up from spring. Let's not forget in spring practice, you had two running backs, Noah Cain and true freshman Trey Holly. Now, Mike Denbrock and Brian Kelly both talked about Trey Holly, and they just raved about him, how eager he was, how much of a sponge he was, how perceptive he was to coaching, how excited he was to be there, which I love. When you're a true freshman coming in, that's what you should be. You should be a sponge. You should be eager. You should be willing to learn. But also, with that aside, Trey Holly is just not ready yet. And that's okay. He doesn't need to be ready yet. He didn't need to be ready in March and April before he really officially started school. I mean, he's still technically a senior in high school. But Yeah, that was just Noah Cain and Trey Holly. Big switch up now because now you're getting Josh Williams and Armoni Goodwin back. Both of those two missed spring practice because they were recovering from surgeries and injuries sustained at the end of last season. You get Josh Williams and Armoni Goodwin back into the fold. You get John Emery back into the fold more likely than not. I mean, Brian Kelly spoke on that at SEC Media Days. He said he fully expects John Emery to be cleared by the beginning of training camp. He mentioned just a couple of things. I'm assuming just red tape that they had to go through to make sure that he was 100% and fully cleared by the NCAA. A reminder, John Emery was academically ineligible for the spring, which unfortunately is not something that's new for John Emery. He missed the beginning of the 2022 season because he was still serving the suspension that he had in 2021 for not being academically eligible. So this is not something that's new, unfortunately, for John Emery. But the good news is, per Brian Kelly at SEC Media Days, fully expect John Emery to get back into the fold for fall camp. So it's not just those five, Noah Cain, Josh Williams, Armoni Goodwin, John Emery, and true freshman Trey Holly. Don't forget, he added Logan Diggs from Notre Dame. Logan Diggs, who was a starting running back for Notre Dame. And I know that we've heard all the stuff from Notre Dame fans on social media that he was buried on the depth chart at Notre Dame. He's still going to absolutely be in this running back competition, in addition to a name that we know very well, Trey Bradford, who is back at LSU for the third time in the most bizarre and interesting chain of events. Trey Bradford is back at LSU. So you're looking at an incredibly crowded running back room, but I think that's going to be a really exciting and positive thing. Last year in this offense, it really was kind of a running back by committee. It was highlighting the strengths of each individual running back. When you've got your guys that can catch passes out of the backfield, when you got your just bruisers at the line of scrimmage, when you've got your third down backs, you've got your red zone backs. I have a feeling with how many bodies and good running backs are in this room, it's going to be something similar. But what I'm excited to see throughout camp, like, you're not just like, all of these guys aren't competing for one starting spot at the running back position. I know that we as LSU fans are so accustomed to having that one go-to guy, whether it was Leonard Fournette in the early 2010s to mid 2010s, whether it was Darius Geis after that, whether it was Clyde Edwards-Helaire, the one go-to back that was pretty much your every down back. You're not going to see that this year, I don't think, because that's not what we saw last year. And I think you've just got too much talent and too much variance of talent in that room to just have a one go-to guy. So I'm excited to see the roles that these individual running backs kind of fall into, which emerges as, your go-to guy in the passing game, who emerges as your third down back, and also who improves upon what they were able to do last season. John Emery, we all know, is a hell of a back. You got to take care of the football. Can you work on that throughout the offseason? Can you be a more reliable running back and take care of the football and not fumble the football? What does Logan Diggs add to this room? What does, kind of an element of competition does he add to this room? I mean, like, I can look at Notre Dame film all day long and look at his stats at Notre Dame, but how does he fit into this room is what I'm looking forward to kind of seeing unfold in practice, is how the running backs are utilized, how they've improved year over year since there is so much retention at that position, and how does the position group kind of work itself out? Where does each individual running back fit? So it's not a true competition. I don't think it's a true battle, but every guy's going to have to fight for their spot. And every guy is going to have to prove that, hey, if this is my role, I can do it well. Second position battle that I'm excited to see unfold, and I think it's going to be a pretty important one. We'll get into that coming up next. Thanks again for making Locked On LSU your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. All right, offensive position battles. Like I mentioned, I'm excited to watch the running back battle, I guess is the fair word. Battle, situation, all of the above. But what I'm really excited about, maybe most excited about, I guess you could call it a battle. Maybe it's not really a battle at all. Maybe it's just simply a competition. Maybe it's simply two really good players at their positions with their roles already clearly identified. And that's the quarterback position. And the reason why I don't want to call it a battle is because a battle to me is you have no idea who's going to be starting week 1. That decision is going to be made in training camp. I think that Alabama finds itself in a similar position. Ole Miss, Auburn, they find themselves in very similar positions that they've got 3 or 4 options of starting quarterbacks that could start week 1, maybe 2. But that is it. Maybe there's a clear leader after a couple days of camp. Maybe there's a clear leader already. But overall, it's a true battle because you don't know who it's going to be, and you're going to figure it out during camp. We know who the starting quarterback is going to be, and that's going to be Jayden Daniels. Brian Kelly already said that. He said that at the end of last season and doubled down at that at SEC Media Days. But the reason why I'm still counting it into my conversation of competitions, battles, things that I'm excited to watch in camp is because it's not like it's Jayden Daniels' job that's under lock and key no matter what and everything's all peachy. I mean, let me remind you of what Brian Kelly had to say about the quarterback situation at SEC Media Days just a couple of weeks ago.
Recruiting accent for the 2024 cycle?
I think my accent's pretty good, and it's gotten better, throughout the recruiting process. It depends on where if I'm in northern Louisiana or southern Louisiana, sometimes I get over Lake Charles, it's got to change a little bit. But Jayden's our starter. He'll start, but he'll have to continue to improve and progress because Garrett is getting better every single day as well. So you want to talk about great competition? It's about as good as a head coach could hope for at the quarterback position. So Jayden's the starter, but he's got to have a great camp. He's got to continue to progress. He's got to continue to work. He's got to continue to move forward because the guy right there as well, he wants to take his job in the right way. They've got a great relationship, but he wants his job too. So I think that's a really positive situation.
The accent thing, I'm over it. It's old, it's dry, it's whatever. But the important thing is what he said about the quarterbacks. It's Jayden's job, but he has to have a good camp. He has to continue to improve. That, yeah, it's Jayden's job and Jayden's going to be our starter. However, it's not like he doesn't have a quarterback that could start at pretty much every program in the country sitting behind him and wanting to take his job. And I like that he clarified that, look, they've got a good relationship. This is all a healthy competition. And I think that is such a good thing for this quarterback position, for this offense, and really for this team as a whole. My co-host in Nashville, he's a former NFL player. Played in the league for 14, 15 years. He was a receiver for the Titans, for the Ravens, finished out his career, a couple other places. But he said to me, he's seen it before with quarterbacks, that when, a veteran quarterback is coming in, or maybe a backup quarterback is coming in, and the roles are so clearly defined and there's really no competition, he's seen it before that some guys just show up to camp one day like, I'm tired, went out last night, whatever it might be. I'm not really going to give it my 100%. And then when you only have a couple of weeks to work with, you really can't afford to have a single day where you're not 100%. That hurts the team. So why I think it's an important thing is because neither of these two can afford to take their foot off the gas. Neither of these two can afford to not be 110% every single day and trying to get better, because Jayden Daniels can think, well, if there's a day where I don't give it my all, well, that's so much more progress that Garrett is going to make, and he's only going to, that gap between us is only going to get smaller. And Garrett can look at it and think, look, I don't have the starting job right now, but I want the starting job right now, and I'll do everything in my power in order to get it. So I think it's a good and positive thing that these two are competing against one another, even though the roles where it is right now are pretty clearly defined. Jayden's the starter. And I'm excited to see what that actually looks like. Like, we can say in theory when you've got a quarterback competition that pushes one another. But I want to see what that actually looks like between the two. Jayden Daniels, he looks bigger. He sounds more confident. So how does that translate onto the football field, and how much better and more confident can he get now that he's being pushed by a really good quarterback in Garrett Nussmeier? I'm excited to see how that unfolds. I'm excited to actually hear and read and evaluate what that quarterback competition actually looks like and how that comes to fruition. How much better Jayden Daniels is because Garrett Nussmeier is there. How much better Garrett Nussmeier gets because Jayden Daniels is standing in his way, so to speak. So I'm excited to see how that quarterback battle kind of unfolds. And while it's not a true battle, it's not a controversy, it's going to be fun to watch the two kind of go back and forth and how the two add their own little spice, so to speak, into this offense. That's going to do it for me today. Fall camp is back. Football is almost here. I am so excited. I am so ready for it. I'll have a full breakdown for all of your everydayers out there. I'll have a full breakdown of the first day of fall camp on tomorrow's edition of Locked On LSU.